Welcome to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I'm your host, Fabian motherfucking Ojeda, and I don't know shit, but that's okay. All right, let's get this shit started. Thank you, everybody, for listening to the Ignorance is Strength podcast. I hope you all enjoyed the previous episode with author Thea Lambert. Definitely wish her a lot of luck on all of her new age romance novels. It's not the typical Fabio book anymore. So check those out if that's something that interests you. I'm back today with a brand new guest. Want to welcome to the podcast for the very first time, Mr. Zach Arnold. How you doing, Zach?
Hey, good, Fabian. How are you? Thank you for having me.
Yeah, for sure, man. Real good. And, just like as we were talking about before we press record, you're a super busy guy, right?
Oh, somewhat, yeah.
Got a lot of things loaded up, a lot of things going on, trying to keep the world entertained, right?
Oh, yeah.
So what's your number one? What's your big project right now? What are you really working on right now?
Right now, I'm actually working on establishing my YouTube channel. It's called The Incredible Impression.
An Incredible Impression. Okay, and so
yes,
this
sir.
This is where you do impressions.
Yes, I do impressions, and I do mainly people that have been long since deceased. So my act is kind of sort of deceased. I mean, if people who are under 20 will probably have no idea who any of these people are. So,
well, that works for me because I'm definitely not in my 20s.
Oh, so
yeah. Who's your number one? Like, who do people always, when you go to a party or something, they say, "Hey, Zach, let me get you to impersonate this guy. Let me show you off to this person." Who do they?
Oh, Dr. Phil's one of the best ones that they love me to do. So
Dr. Phil?
Yeah.
Okay, so catch me outside.
All right. Now I know that you know that I know that you know that what you did was wrong. And in order to fix the wrong, you have to fix it with something right. Okay. However, what you may think that is right, that you're doing right to fix the wrong, may still be wrong, even though you think it's right, but it's wrong. And that could put you in deep shit.
Yeah, that's pretty good, man. I never realized, but Dr. Phil's kind of like Mr. Mackey from South Park, huh?
In a way, yes. That's what my stepdaughter says. She says, you sound nothing like Dr. Phil. You sound like Mr. Mackey from South Park. And I'm like, yeah, I guess you're right.
But I think there's some parallels there in that accent.
Yeah. I've been told I do a very badass Cheech and Chong.
So, okay.
I mean, I don't really have many jokes that I've written out for them. But I mean, I do have one little thing, but I don't.
Well, I've interviewed Tommy Chong, man.
Have you really, man? Oh, that's awesome, man. That's really cool. And Cheech, he's more of man, he's just more like a party animal, man. Come on, man. Mm-hmm. So that's my Cheech and Chong right there.
Well, how did you start doing these impressions, or what? Did you just like start mimicking what's on TV or something like that?
It started when I fell in love with the music of the Beatles, and I can remember seeing a Beatles tribute band from New Jersey, from Atlantic City, called the Mahoney Brothers, and they do a whole slew of tribute acts. They do Elvis, Buddy Holly, Jerry Lee Lewis, Neil Diamond, Willie Nelson. They do the Beach Boys, and of course, they do an entire Beatles show. And I remember sitting there in the audience thinking, I'd like to start playing the drums and start portraying Ringo in a Beatles tribute band. But besides that, I could have picked any instrument to play, but I chose Ringo because I have Tourette Syndrome. And I have all these like physical and verbal tics. And I realized while watching the Beatles perform on Ed Sullivan and stuff, the old reruns and all that, I saw how Ringo, he had that shaking of the head and those little mannerisms and stuff. So I realized that if I did that, I could actually incorporate my Tourette syndrome into that. It would be something to hide it behind.
Huh.
And because at one point in time, they were just completely out of control, my tics were. And so I was like, and I wanted to be a musician. And so Ringo Starr was what inspired me to, get into doing impressions initially.
It kind of reminds me of I don't know if you ever heard of Scatman John from the 90s.
Yes,
That
yes, I
song.
have.
I'm a scat
Yes,
man. Yeah.
yes,
He's
sir. Yep, I remember him. I love his music. I love that song,
yeah,
especially.
that's a great song. Even like looking back on it now, it's just like, man, that fits anywhere. But he kind
Oh
of
yeah,
used his stutter, right, to make music. Like he's like, when I'm talking, you can hear the stutter. No, and when I'm singing, right, it's not really noticeable. And it was kind of a
right.
way for him to work in that stutter. And so you have kind of a similar thing there, right, where you're working in all the different takes and everything.
Oh
Being
yes,
Ringo. So that kind of drew a little bit of a parallel there in my mind.
right.
And
Yeah.
I just think it's pretty cool that you were able to do that. Now, I've never actually talked to anyone who had Tourette syndrome, and my only exposure to it is what I've seen on TV, right? And so I got a question. Is like, most people think it's like, you're just talking and out of nowhere, and it's like, fuck you, dickhead, blah 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 blah, blah, right? You just start
Yeah,
cussing and stuff
no,
like that.
it's not like that. No, those are completely over exaggerated.
Uh huh. Yeah.
So, um, but I mean, some people can actually get pretty severe, but through, as we like to say, through medication, we actually are able to control that. I mean, I'm just putting a punchline in there. I don't mean like illegal drugs or anything.
Right. Right.
Um, but I had a doctor actually in Florida who had me kind of serve as his guinea pig. And, he would say, okay, well, we're going to put you on because he thought I was showing a little bit of signs of manic depression and stuff.
Mm.
And so he put me on Depakote. And I was doing some research and I found out, Depakote is not really for people with manic depression or, bipolar syndrome or Tourette syndrome. It's most of the time it just makes it worse.
Mm.
So I asked him about that and he said, well, I'm just going to keep you on it because it's in my mind, it's doing good for you.
Mm-hmm.
So it didn't do good for me. I went and sought another doctor. And as Rodney Dangerfield used to say, oh, I'm all right now, doing all right. So I
uh,
do
mhm.
I do a whole slew of impressions. But then what actually got me into doing actual impressions of like movie stars and stuff in 2001, right after President George W. Bush took office.
Mhm.
The famed impersonator and comedian Rich Little. I'm sure you've heard of Rich Little. He's done the Dean Martin roast and the Lucy show. He does all these impressions of all these people.
Mhm.
And he actually did a show called The Presidents, where he came out as each president from John F. Kennedy to George W. Bush. And this was before September 11th. It was right after Bush took office. So he came out, he did every single president, and he had maybe 2 minutes between acts to make up as the next president. And I remember sitting there going, I think impersonating famous people is a really cool thing to do.
Mm.
So I started working on some of the voices that he was doing.
Mhm.
And the very first actual person besides Beatles that I ever impersonated was Richard Nixon. And I mean, Nixon was just, he's a no-brainer, got the
Uh,
whole, I'm not a crook. I'm
uh,
more of a cook than a crook.
yeah, he's got that pretty distinct voice and everything. Yeah, and as far as like physically, right? Yeah, you had the mannerisms that you can really.
Yeah, and he had that. I mean, the jaw with the cheek was always shaking, and
The jowls
so
like a
yeah,
bulldog or something.
I'm
Yeah,
having a jowl movement.
you get on the Simpsons with that, man.
Oh, I know. And then of course I had some dental work recently, so I mean it's easy for me to do Jimmy Carter. I mean the smile is, ha
Yeah,
hot damn, it's good to be here. Jimmy Carter is easy.
Uh-huh.
And Jimmy Stewart is by far one of my favorites to do. Jimmy
Hmm.
Stewart.
Uh-huh.
It's a Wonderful Life. He had all that. The thing is, I didn't really know who he was originally
Hmm.
until I started seeing Rich Little do him. And then one day I was sitting at home looking for new voices to work on, and I mean, I just happened to be watching Rich Little's DVD of him doing the President's production, and he has Ronald Reagan. He's talking to Jimmy Stewart, and I just started, doing the whole, this is Jimmy Stewart, and before I knew it, I had his voice down.
Uh-huh.
And but impersonations are great to do. I
Yeah.
mean,
I
I
mean,
mean, go ahead.
it's funny that you mentioned though that it all came from like music too, because like that's what I was gonna ask, right? Like I'm like, you're just trying to like match, people that you heard on TV or in music. Because I remember, like I really love music, and I remember trying to sing along to songs and stuff like that. And I think I'm a pretty decent singer, just tooting my own horn there. And a lot of the times it was just because I was just trying to match, like what the singer sounded like. Like I was,
Oh yeah,
wasn't even just looking for the notes. I was looking for like their voice. Like I'm trying to match their voice.
oh
Um,
yeah, definitely.
uh-huh. And I don't think I'm great at doing impressions or anything like that, but I can, do a pretty good job trying to match somebody's voice, singing voice.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, with I was able to match Ringo's voice singing.
Uh-huh.
But the other one I've been working on, I did this at karaoke one night. Excuse me, back in the day, I did a Creed song with Arms Wide Open,
That's what I was I
and
was I was gonna say, man, like Scott Stapp, he
and
has
my
a very like imitatable voice.
yeah, I mean his vocals are just unmistakable.
Uh-huh.
So I mean, I started doing with Arms Wide Open, and everybody in the bar turned and looked at me as if they thought Scott Stapp was in the room. And
Uh-huh.
they see this Asian guy singing karaoke, and, well, I just heard the news today, and they're all like, whoa, what the?
Uh-huh.
So stuff like that, just I've always been known as a show off. And throughout school, I was always the one needing the most attention and stuff.
Mm.
So in a way, it's just me being a show off is what, gives me the one the want to be able to, have talent to do impressions and play a musical instrument and stuff.
Yeah. Now I
Uh,
gotta ask, man, like how do people take that though? Because some people, they're like, oh, cool, you can do impressions. Other people are just like, the fuck's wrong with this guy? You know what I mean?
Well, my stepdaughter, she's 14, and I start like talking in a different voice. And
Mm-hmm.
what she doesn't like is the fact that, teenagers, they're trying to fit in with the crowd. They're trying, and they're all like, you're embarrassing me. Don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
And what she hates about it is the fact that one minute I'll say something to her in my voice, then the next I'll be talking to her like Dr. Phil, and
Uh-huh.
then the next I'll talk to her like Rodney Dangerfield, and she's like, "Oh, this is too much. All right, just stop."
Mm-hmm.
And uh, but other people say about it, they find humor in it,
Mm-hmm.
because they're like, one thing about him is you never know who you're gonna meet next. You never know
Right.
who's gonna come out of his mouth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's pretty cool. I have no problem with it. I think it's funny. It's just like when you mentioned attention, right? Some people think it's like some people see others getting attention and they're like, I don't like that. They become just haters. It's like,
Oh yeah,
they're doing something that I don't get. So I want to belittle them, or I want to attack them or whatever.
yeah. I mean, so I find it in a way that some people, there's a lot of envy going around these days, and when somebody envies you, they don't know how exactly to approach it. my feeling is they want to be nice about it, but they're just so overwhelmed with envy for you that what comes out of their mouth is just utter hate and insult.
Yeah.
But when I stop and I think about it, I'm like, you know what? They're envious. They're jealous that they don't have that exact same unique gift that some of us have. I mean, envy is going to be everywhere you go. It's a thing of life. Mm-hmm. So, but I get through it, you know.
I bring this up because, you know, you say you want to start like a YouTube channel and everything like that. And YouTube is a toxic ass place, man, for people.
Oh, it
sometimes
is.
They just bring their stupid opinions about anything. You can have the greatest thing up there and somebody will, you know, be talking shit about it. Now, you know, with that being said, you know, if you were to tell me like 20 years ago, hey, I'm going to be on the internet, you know, doing impressions, I'd be like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Right? Like, who wants to do that? You know, but now I see there's an avenue for everyone. Do whatever they want on there. I mean, for fuck's sake, people are eating in their cars and we're watching them in the millions.
Oh, exactly.
You know?
Yeah. I mean, let me ask you it this way. Can you go past an accident on the highway or any road and not look?
Right.
Can you? I mean, it's like, but I mean, in some countries, it's second nature. I mean, Gabriel Iglesias, the comedian, Fluffy, he was talking about going to India. And he was saying how in India, if people just are about their daily schedule, they need to get somewhere. So if they see an accident alongside the road, they just look and say, pick them up, take them over to the side. They'll be okay. Mm-hmm. Whereas here, you're all like, oh, what's going on here? Oh, I got to see this, got to see that, you know? Mm-hmm. And I mean, it's just all over the place. And
film it.
Yeah, I mean, though. I mean, I always say this. I go to the dentist, of course, a lot for my teeth, but I make a joke out of it because Bill Cosby had that whole dentist skit. I'm sure you remember that.
Uh-huh.
And he puts that thing, the saliva sucker in his mouth and says, this will suck up your face. Mm-hmm. And the dentist will go outside to laugh at you. So I'm there in the dentist chair. My doctor walks out of the room for a few minutes and I start taking the saliva sucker. I just pick it up and like put it in my mouth and start. And then I see the dentist walking back behind me with his hand over his, like pulling his mask up. Mm-hmm. And so I took my phone out and I took a picture of it, a selfie. And you see him in the background, like walking, but he's got like this little smirk on his face. And I put a caption that said, when the saliva sucker starts sucking up your face like an industrial vacuum cleaner, the dental assistant pulls out her phone and starts live streaming on Facebook. And I put that up on my Facebook page and I got quite a few hits on it. But then I got some people that commented that said, oh, that's not funny at all. That's really fucked up, you know? And, my theory is though, if you can't find humor in what people are saying, then you don't understand comedy. Mm-hmm. So I understand that for the big part there.
Yeah, and I mean that's going to be up there, you know, like even if you have like something as simple as like a cooking channel, somebody's going to be like, that's not how you make it. You're a terrible person, you know?
Yeah.
I don't get it, you know, if I don't like something, I just don't watch it, you know?
Right.
But with that being said, though, like what do you want to do with this YouTube channel, right? What's you know, what are some of your goals? What do you think is going to come of it?
Well, what I'm hoping to do is, because I got my YouTube influence from a very well-known YouTube vlogger named Adam the Woo, and a lot of people have heard of him. Some people haven't, but he's pretty popular. He's pretty out there. Mm-hmm. And he goes around just like a lot of YouTubers do nowadays. They go around and they document anything and everything, like just little things on back roads of, you know, greater inner roadside Americana. And others go to like famous places. And, you know, some people just take their camera and look up in the tree and say, you know, ooh, look, a nice bird, beautiful day out. What a great day to be alive. Mm-hmm. And I do stuff like that. I go around, I document things. For example, I'm in Lancaster, Pennsylvania right now, but before I was here, I was in South Carolina with Stephen Joyner and Eddie Deason.
Mm-hmm.
And while I was there, I watch Unsolved Mysteries, the original Unsolved
Uh-huh.
Mysteries with Robert Stack, which,
Right.
in my opinion, is the only Unsolved Mysteries. And there was an episode in from Roebuck, South Carolina, which is 10 minutes away from Spartanburg. It's in Spartanburg County.
Mm-hmm.
1995, a young lady was murdered in her own in the beauty salon that she owned. And I went to Roebuck, and I was able to find the locations where Unsolved Mysteries filmed at.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to line up some of the shots that were in the segment, and I actually compared them. I threw pictures up on the screen of comparison shots from the show versus where I was standing. And then I went over to the cemetery up the road where where the lady was laid to rest, and I
Mm-hmm.
paid my respects there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I just little things like that. Also did an Unsolved Mysteries one down in my home state in Florida. I drove 2.5 hours out of my way just to document another murder that occurred down there. A young lady was fell madly in love, head over heels with a man twice her age, and she ended up immediately falling victim to domestic violence,
Mm-hmm.
and eventually she was getting ready to divorce him, and he tracked her down. He stalked her, tracked her down, and stabbed her to death in broad daylight. So I went down to Bradenton, Florida, and Sarasota to pay respects to her.
Mm-hmm.
And I got quite a few hits on that. As a matter of fact, one of the comments I got uh, was from a classmate of one of her daughters, uh, and he told me in detail. He said, I went to school with her daughter, and I remember one day I showed up and she was very sad. And
Mm-hmm.
I asked her what was wrong, and she said, "My daddy killed my mommy this weekend."
Jesus Christ.
And I literally was like, oh my God,
Mm-hmm.
So, but I feel it's important to bring these subjects to the attention of people, especially in the world we live in today.
Mm-hmm.
And domestic violence, breast cancer awareness. I advocate for that. And I mean, this is Breast Cancer Awareness Month,
Mm-hmm.
and so I advocate for that. I believe that when it comes to domestic violence, there should be a absolute zero tolerance policy for it in every state
Yeah.
in this nation, as well as anywhere in the world. I mean, I know there's some countries that condone that, but
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't put up with that stuff. That
No, no.
my theory is any man who has the audacity to put his hands on a woman is I don't believe that's human right there. I think if you assault a woman in a cowardly way like that, you don't deserve to walk the face of this earth. I mean, that's just my opinion.
Well, you know what's
But
what's kind of bullshit though now is that with all of these and look, I 100% through and through, like I believe masculinity is important. You got to be a man, but you have all these people that are kind of going overboard with the whole alpha male, like the
yeah,
whole all the Andrew Tate nut huggers, right? Um
yeah,
and they're out there, trying to defend uh domestic violence some of the time. Like look at the whole thing with, I don't know if you remember in the news lately with like Dana White when he was like when he slapped his wife,
yes, yes,
and you got
yes,
all these dipshits defending it. It's like, dude, there is no way that back in the early 90s and before, like anyone would defend that. I don't
right,
understand when it took a turn and guys are starting to be all like, well, she deserved it, right? She did it first. Like, no, no, no,
yeah,
no, no. We know that that's not acceptable. You walk away or you just fucking, I mean, I hate to say it, but you just you take it and move on. But you don't
Yeah.
attack and then go and lunge at her and then try to attack even more, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I hear some. I mean, if you watch enough, the movie with Jennifer Lopez,
Mm-hmm.
she, her husband Billy Campbell played her husband in that, and he said, I make the money in this house, so I set the rules, and if you don't abide by the rules, then there's going to be consequences. And I saw an interview where Billy Campbell was giving, and he said that Jennifer Lopez actually selected him personally for the role of Mitch, her husband.
Huh.
And he was a little hesitant to do it at first, but when she said what it was all about and stuff, because he was really starstruck by J Lo, and but when he found out what the movie was all about, he was an advocate. He advocated for against domestic violence, and so he said, "I'm in immediately. I'm in." That he wanted to bring attention to the fact, and he said by the big fight scene in the end where she kills his character, he said that was a demonstration, and let that be a lesson to any man that puts his hands on a woman. You do that, you're going to suffer the consequence like my character did, possibly.
I mean, yeah. No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine. No, I was listening to you there.
Yeah, I mean, I was talking about how this has kind of just become more of a recent thing where we're trying to defend, this whole domestic violence mindset. I'm talking like when we were back in the 90s, like, remember 90210?
Yes, yes.
Remember the actor, what was his name? Jamie Walters?
Oh, yeah.
Played the abusive boyfriend or whatever. Mm-hmm. That guy's career was ruined because of that role.
Oh, I know. I mean, some people get typecast in these things. And, I mean, just the way their character is presented, they get typecast. And they're like, nobody wants you for a different role.
I'm saying because people felt so strongly against domestic violence, like,
right.
Even though it wasn't real, right? His career was essentially, was ruined, right? It was put to a halt. He couldn't get much further than that, So that's how seriously I think we took it. But somehow down the line, things got a little muddled, and now we're kind of almost playing this victim mentality as men sometimes, man. Where it's like, well, we're not getting a fair shake, and we got to fight for our right to, be masculine, this and that. It's like, no, it's all bullshit, right? Anybody who, anybody
I mean, I don't believe in the whole masculinity thing. I believe, a woman deserves to be treated the way a woman deserves to be treated. And if you are the man, but a real man, provides for his family. A real man also volunteers to cook dinner for his family. A real man doesn't come home and throw his coat on the couch and say, honey, I'm home, make me a sandwich, bitch. Right. That's not how I see it. I mean, I've seen so many people that say, well, when I get home, my wife better have dinner on the table or she's in trouble. And with me, it's like, you know what? I'm going to go home. I'm going to give my girl a kiss, and I'm going to say, what would you like for supper? My treat, or I'll cook.
Yeah. Well, I think it's funny because it almost sounds like now maybe it's a cyclical thing, because that was very acceptable in like the 50s, 60s, right? I mean, I wasn't alive back then, but it was that like, bitch, where's my sandwich kind of thing,
Yeah.
And I think, at some point we started taking a stand against it. Now it's kind of like more acceptable where you can be a complete douchebag, but I don't know, man. I don't like that stuff one bit. So I mean, it's kind of, it's interesting. You're gonna put some of that stuff into your YouTube, right? It's not just a comedy, right? You want to point out some important topics and things like that. I do want to ask specifically. So with the YouTube, right, and any sort of online platform and things like that, people are monetizing this, man. People are becoming successful. They make a living from it. Is that something that's your goal, or is this more like a passion project for you? What do you want to do as far as like success when it comes to maybe your YouTube channel? You have a podcast, all this other stuff. What are you trying to do with that, if anything?
Well, for right now, I'm just doing it mainly for passion. I would like to monetize on it eventually,
Mhm.
But right now, I mean, working with Mr. Joyner, I'm trying to be able to get more into the public entertainment industry, like voice acting. Um, and I'm talking, Steve recommended this lady from South Carolina who is a voice coach.
Mhm.
And I forget her last name, but her first name's Diane,
Mhm.
and she offered to help me uh, build my voice acting resume
Mhm.
demo reel. So I'm going to be doing that, and hopefully then maybe I can get some voice acting jobs, and
Mhm.
just kind of go from there. But I'm not keeping the YouTube option. I'm not keeping that. I'm not giving up on that option because I mean
Mhm.
I'd still love to do YouTube, travel around, vlog, make some documentaries and stuff. And like I want to go to Mount Rushmore. I know so many people have vlogged that, but it never hurts for someone else to. I want to go overseas eventually. I want to go over to England,
Mhm.
and to Germany, to Italy, to Ireland and Paris and stuff. Um, want to go over to Las Vegas and vlog over there. I've never been to LA, never in
Huh.
my life, and I always wanted to go out there and document some things. But
Cool.
my channel is called The Incredible Impression,
Mhm.
and the reason it's called The Incredible Impression is because the goal of the channel is to bring an event or something that I am enjoying or going through an experience in my life that I believe will hopefully have a lasting impression on
Mhm.
my viewers. So that's why I call the channel The Incredible Impression, because I want to make an incredible impression on people.
That and the great impressions, right?
Absolutely. Well, that's actually what it first was about. Um, the channel was first called Florida's Hollywood Impressionist.
Huh.
And there's still some videos on there. All if you scroll all the way down from like a year ago, that's when I was first known as Florida's Hollywood Impressionist. But then I decided because the impressions for me on YouTube weren't really going anywhere.
Mhm.
So I started racking my brain saying, how can I keep the YouTube channel, keep the impressions on there, but do something um, more invigorating for people, more exciting. And so I came to the conclusion that, if I want to do an impression of somebody, I want it to have a lasting impression on my viewers.
Mhm.
So I started taking the ideas of what every other YouTube star is doing and stuff with traveling around and vlogging different things, and just put that into that. But also, what I choose to document, some of them are things that hardly anybody else does document, like the unsolved mysteries things.
Uh-huh.
There's not very many people who document the whole story and visit the places where they actually occurred. So that's one of the unique features that I bring to my channel is being, not too mainstream. I mean, I can be mainstream, but I also want to go and do some very, I guess you can call them like isolated topics that hardly anybody else does. I like to quote it as isolated
Mhm.
because there's not many people that do those unsolved mysteries things, and sometimes just sit out front of your house and have a little chit chat to the camera and
Mhm.
stuff.
Yeah.
So things like that is what shapes my YouTube channel.
Sure. Yeah. Um. Now, I wanted to ask because I did notice, like, I looked you up and you have a podcast. How deep are you into your podcast?
I actually didn't start the podcast yet.
Okay.
Um, I was supposed to start it this month, but then Steve and I were talking last week, and I mentioned to him that I'd rather actually put my podcast on hold because I'd like to try to get started on some voice acting.
Okay. I
And
see.
that's when he said, I'm going to get you booked on a couple podcasts to try to bring you out of anonymity.
Mm.
So that's what he's doing by is promoting me by doing that. And I will tell you this though. I could never ask for a greater PR than him. I mean, he is really great at what he does.
Mhm.
I mean, in one day, I got an email from you. I got like 5 other emails from 5 other podcasters around the world. One was actually in England, in the
Yeah.
UK,
Uh-huh.
and I had like over 5, 6 emails to answer back in one day.
Yeah.
So
I mean, that's pretty cool. I think the first time I talked to him, it was like, I was just online. I was starting a podcast and I'd had probably good like 15, 16, maybe 20 episodes in already.
mhm,
And I was looking through like a Facebook group, but these groups are always bullshit, man. They're like, oh, you listen to mine, I'll listen to yours, we'll rate each other. And nobody
right,
ever does that, and I already know
no,
like that's not going to go anywhere. But
exactly,
I think I answered one of his posts, and then he was saying like, "Hey, I'm trying to book a bunch of people on podcasts, blah blah blah." I said, "Oh, message me and whatnot." We went from there, and immediately I'm on the phone with him, and he's already got somebody else on the other end. Like, "Hey, I want to put you in contact with this person." Blah blah blah. It's
oh
just
yeah,
it's networking. It's like it's kind of a lost art sometimes. You know, uh,
right,
where people don't they don't even answer the phone anymore.
oh
Like
yeah,
yeah, and even your closest friends and family, you're trying to call them and it's like, well, can you text me first? Like, what the fuck do we have a
right,
phone for? Like I'm a caller. I call people.
yeah.
Um, uh,
I
but I
mean,
think,
I like to go back and forth. I do everything: call, email, and text.
mhm,
I don't have a preferred specific way of doing it. And I noticed everybody these days is so picky. Like, don't call me, text me, or don't text me, I'll text you, et cetera, et cetera.
so weird,
So
man. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, I figure my theory is if you're going to be successful, you got to answer your emails, your calls, and your texts. You
Hmm.
know, because if you do, I mean, there, as you were saying, all those executives and stuff nowadays, they don't even answer it.
Hmm.
They don't respond, which I think is very unprofessional.
Yeah. No, I agree, man. Like I get it though. Like sometimes it's a scam and whatnot, but not every call
Right.
is a scam. Like if you have some of these numbers saved, right, and you're still ignoring it, like I don't know. I don't get it. That's so weird. If I see
Right.
somebody's number and they're calling me and I know who they are, it's like, yeah, I'm gonna answer it if I'm not at work or something like that. But
Right.
it's a different world, man.
Yeah.
With that being said, too, okay, so we're talking about building up, the YouTube and everything and getting your name out there, right? How do you find that right now? Do you find it kind of difficult to kind of get out there, or like, because I know for me, look, my podcast is what it is. What it is. I'm not out there trying to monetize. I'm not really actively trying to build it or anything like that. Whoever
Right.
listens, listens. If they like it, they like it. I don't care. I'm having fun with it, right?
Yeah.
Now you're trying to build something, right? How
Mhm.
how how much of a task is it, right? Do you find yourself kind of like having trouble growing, or is it something that's come kind of easy to you? What's that like?
Well, I found that in order to be successful, you have to first of all believe in yourself. You
Mhm.
have to know and be able to say to those who are haters and say you're never going to make this, you're never going to do this. You know, you got to learn to tell them to look them in the eye and say, I don't care what you think. I'm going to make it. So you got to believe in yourself. Number one. Number two, you got to have the right. You got to know the right people. You got to know who's genuine and who's gonna is just out to fuck you over.
Mm.
So I mean, Steve, for one thing, totally 100% genuine,
Mm.
totally 100%, professional.
Mm.
And I I was actually referred to him by Eddie, and I met him through Eddie.
Okay.
But the thing is, I'll tell you a little story here. You had said about in the beginning of the show here, you said about people saying I'm good. If somebody had said to me, I'm going to be on this show today a couple years ago, and I just laughed and said, yeah, right.
Mm.
Um, when my stepson and I came up to Spartanburg back in July to meet up with Eddie and Steve, I had never met Eddie in person before. I reached out to him over Facebook,
Mm.
and I ended up getting a hold of him. I had to pass through Spartanburg anyways, because at the time I still had a Beatles tribute band, but then that fell through. So now I'm doing my second option, which is getting into voice acting and doing these podcasts and stuff.
Mm.
So I said to Jonathan, who's my stepson, we're on our way up here, and I said to him, because Eddie calls me and says, "Can I bring my manager along?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, sure. He's there to oversee, what you do and all that." I said to my stepson, I said, wouldn't it be funny if, because I did interview Eddie for my YouTube channel, and I said, wouldn't it be funny if Steve, Eddie's manager, saw the interview I did with Eddie and somehow saw potential in me and wanted to make me one of his clients. And we kind of just like laughed, haha, yeah, funny, far out, dream on. Then we just kind of put it to the back of our head, to the back of our minds. 2 days later, I get a phone call from him bright and early in the morning. I hadn't even really woken up yet. And I get Facebook messages from him. "Hey, do you have time to talk?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, just let me get some coffee and I'll call you." So I call him, and he said, "You got potential, man. I see something in you. You are dedicated. I'd like to offer you my service."
Mm.
And so to this day, I'm still like every morning I'm waking up, and the first thing I do is, all right, when am I going to actually wake up? What's going on here?
Uh-huh.
And it's like, wow, I'm not going to wake up. I am awake. This is reality.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie even told me, he said, "You are officially on your way. You're going to make something great out of yourself."
Mm-hmm.
And Steve's even, when I was talking to Steve, he said, "We're going to do some great things together, Zach." And I realized that I finally now have the right people in my life. I have uh, the right people who are willing to look out for me and who will not take me for granted. Because all throughout my life, I was one of the most bullied kids in school. Even my own high school principal did not like me. She would constantly make remarks at me, and I once asked her, I said, "Why are you so like angry and hostile towards me?"
Yeah.
She said, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" I said, "Either a musician or an actor." She goes, "That's not a profession. That's not a job. That's an easy scam to get money from people."
Wow.
Just to act stupid in a way.
Wow.
But in my defense, and this is a punchline that I use, which not really many people take as funny, but I said, when she was saying all that, I was looking in her eyes, and I'm thinking, and as she's saying this, I'm saying, "Your attitude, woman, you're going to meet a premature death." And then just a few years ago, I'm looking in the obituary section. There's her name right there in front of me.
Oh yeah.
So that's like a payback thing that's a comedic payback thing that I say. Everybody develops a trademark,
Uh-huh.
and I'm trying to work through different trademarks, but I don't think that's gonna end up being it, because I've tried it on some people.
You got some of that dark humor in you, huh?
Yeah, but sometimes dark humor pays off,
Yeah. It's pretty big, yeah.
So, yeah.
Though, look, adults, you think, they're when you're in school, like they're there, they got your back. A lot of them don't, man. Like I've worked in schools for a very long time, about 2 decades at this point, right? Almost, yeah. And you think, when you're growing up, these people are good people, they're saints, they're there to guide you. A lot of them don't give a shit. A lot of them are just, like any other person working with other people. They're smoking, doing drugs, drinking all the time, making stupid mistakes. I don't even want to put it on blast, but I've seen like, like teachers or principals that have like, how do I put it, groomed and dated students and things like that. I'm like, these people are fucked up, man.
They are.
And so I don't doubt for a second that person was just a fucking jerk, who was picking on a kid just like all the other kids were picking on you,
Right.
And that's a damn shame, because, and I don't mean to make it even darker, but what if, it could have taken a bad turn and you did some self-harm and shit like that. And, how would they have felt? You know what I'm saying?
Exactly. I mean, but a lot of things I realized, especially with my former principal, is that she did not have an easy life and herself.
Mm.
And I mean, I don't want to brag about her or anything in a negative way, but she had a very troubled time during her career
Mm.
because she was arrested several times on drunk driving charges. And
Jesus.
she was suspended from her work for 2 weeks. And then that still didn't change anything. She still went out and got ticketed for DUI again until the point where she got her doctorate's degree and got a job in the district office of our school district. Two
Wow.
weeks later, it all catches up to her. She gets her doctorate's degree. She comes in to start her first day. They're like, you're not employed here anymore.
Mm.
So, and then from what I understand, she went into total seclusion.
Mm.
She spent all her time inside her house. I had a friend whose cousin lived next door to her, and her windows, her blinds, and her shades were always closed. Um, she never came out of the house. She had people actually, like friends, deliver groceries and things to her. I mean, she didn't have a driver's license anymore, but she rode her bike everywhere, but she had been disgraced to the community.
Mm.
And she just went into total seclusion and did not want to show herself around town. And I don't know what happened to her. I do know she did pass away. And I mean, it's a sad event. I do feel bad for her, honestly.
Mm.
But, I don't know I never found out what the cause of death was. But
Mm.
I'm hoping that it wasn't anything involved with drunk driving or anything.
Oh yeah, yeah, could have been. I mean,
Yeah,
but that just shows right there. These are the people that don't know how to cope with their own shit, and they take it out on kids. Man, that's
right,
not good. Like, it's like I worked directly with kids for a very long time, and it's like, even if they do have a pipe dream, I never want to be the one to burst their bubble and be like, yeah, you're not doing that. Like that's a terrible idea.
yeah,
If
exactly.
when somebody comes to me and tells me they want to be a pro athlete, I do say, hey, it's a tough road, but you got to get
Yeah,
on it. Like if you really want to do that, you should have a backup, a couple of
yes.
backups. But
Oh,
two,
yeah,
you're going to have to work harder than everybody in the room, and so it can be done, and actually, ironically enough, at some point I had a staff member that was a former NFL, player, and I try to get him to explain to these kids like what kind of dedication it takes and things like that. But it's like even if it's like a short, chubby Hispanic kid, saying, "Hey, I want to be an NBA," right? I don't know too
right.
many, brown, short, chubby people in the NBA, but I'm like, can it
Yeah,
be done? Maybe, but you got to really put in the work, but
right.
obviously too have a backup plan. So it's all in how approach things. And also, in your situation, I'm thinking she probably didn't even give you any other sort of fucking, path, right? She probably didn't say, hey, let me help you do this instead. It was just kind of
Right,
ridiculing you, right?
right. And I mean, the one thing is we had an event every year before we went on Christmas break. It was called Bah Humbug Day,
Huh.
where for after lunch hour we just forgot about class, we forgot about learning, and we had these uh things that we could do in the school. Like we could go to like the gym and we could play basketball or something, or we could go swimming in the pool there that we had at the high school, or we could pretty much do whatever, or do karaoke in the cafeteria.
Mm.
Well, I brought a guitar in one year, um, because I had an issue my freshman year that I don't like to talk about, but pretty much I got into some trouble with a
Mm.
couple friends of mine, and which extended pretty much okay. It extended our Christmas break by 3 extra days. So yeah, um, and so I brought a guitar in to play with a couple of my buddies. We were going to go out up to the bleachers by the swimming pool, and we were going to play there. And these guys were all upperclassmen who I was in really good with. We had things set. We were going to sit around and jam, not like a kumbaya sort of thing, but just sit there and strum the six strings and do a little jamming.
Mm-hmm.
So my principal, I come in that morning, and my principal says, what are you doing with the guitar? I said, I brought it so I could, stay out of trouble during Bah Humbug day. I'll just play it with some friends. My couple of the upperclassmen and I, we have plans to play it in the pool, the bleachers. She goes, nope. I said, why not? She goes, Zach, I've told you and I've told you and I've told you many times. Music and playing a guitar for a living is terrible. Go out and get a regular 9 to 5 job, or here's something better. Pick up a football or something. And I was like, well, why don't you yell at the upperclassmen who have their guitars? They're like, or she's like, because they don't cause me trouble 24/7 here at the school. I'm like, how do I cause you trouble? She goes, you hang out with the wrong people. You don't really listen to people. I'm like, well, I do listen. Thank you very much. And I'm a good student. And she goes, not by my books, you're not. And so I was like, well, what do you want me to do? She goes, I want that guitar in my office by lunchtime or I'm suspending you. Dang. So, yeah, I was just like, I was tired of arguing with her. So I was like, now that I'm grown up and stuff, some part of me says, I should have taken more of a stand for myself. But yet I grew up with, my parents were very loving, very caring. They were the kind of parents that said, you go to school, you get your education, you come home, you do your homework, and then you can have TV time or something, or then you can go hang out with friends,
right,
and stuff. But their one motto was, you never disrespect your teachers or your principal.
Right.
And there were times I had to fight myself to keep my mouth shut because I wanted to just scream at her. Yeah, but I knew I couldn't.
It seemed like she had something personal against you, man. It's crazy.
That's what I do believe, that she had something personal. She actually had some issues with any student, really, that if she kind of did, judge you or classified you. If you were not enrolled in honor, if you were not on the honor roll, if you were not in the athletics department, if you were not in cross country, or if you were not in the jazz band, you could be in the if you were in the regular band but not the honors jazz band, then she had no room for you. And yeah, I was like, man, what kind of poor principal would do something like that?
It sounds like with their hate for musicians, she was probably like a groupie that never got a call back,
Yeah, well, what happened was, what happened in freshman year was I got the opportunity to see Paul McCartney for the very first time in Washington. And my parents picked me up from school early. But, back then, you had to, and still to this day, you have to get written permission from the principal. Well, my dad handed in the slip. My principal, with no qualms or trepidations, signed it off immediately. And then I was talking to her, and she told me, I don't like Paul McCartney. I've told you many times, Zach, I don't like music at all. And I was thinking, then why is she letting me out of school early? When I came back, a friend of mine who was actually in good with her, she said, so I heard that that she actually signed you out just to get rid of you for the day because she didn't want you around. I was like, well, that explains a lot. I was like, hey, it just means more time away from her. I can take that.
Yeah. Well, man, it sucks you had to go through all that bullshit, but whatever, man. It's like, it's shaped who, you are today and everything like that.
Oh, yeah.
Before we get out of here, man, I just want to check in, there any social media where people can follow you? Where can people find you?
Yes, you can follow me on Facebook, Zach Arnold, ZACHARNOLD. I'm labeled as a public figure there, so you just go on. You can friend request me, but you can also follow me. Now, there's many Zach Arnolds there on Facebook, so I'll actually forward you the link to my Facebook page so that you can put it up on your page for people to actually locate me easier. I'm on Instagram at FabZach4ever. I'll send you that link as well.
Okay.
And also of course, on YouTube, The Incredible Impression. And you'll have that link as well for your viewers. And I'm always taking suggestions for things that people want to see me vlog and go on and adventures. I'm trying to get into voice acting. As I said, I do a lot of impressions. People sometimes like to hear some of my impressions. One of my favorite ones to do, though, is Andy Rooney of 60 Minutes. You might remember him. That little curmudgeon you saw for like a minute at the end of 60 Minutes every week. And he was always asking stupid questions, or, he was always examining stupid things that were kind of boring. But when you stopped and heard what he had to say, you understood his point of view. Like, I mean, he would say stuff like, why do they conduct autopsies on condemned prisoners? Isn't it obvious what the cause of death was? Dumb, just stupid people. It makes me cranky at times. So things like that. And but yeah, you can find me on my YouTube, find me on Instagram and Facebook. And and as I said, I'm trying to get out there and make a name for myself and just break into the entertainment world.
Sure, man. Well, I really appreciate having you on, man. It's really, we kind of went all over the place with things, but that's good. I always like to, learn a little bit about, different people that I have on here, but I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Man.
And I really appreciate you having me on. Thank you so much. It was a great honor being on here today.
Yeah, for sure, man. For everybody listening thank you, man. One more time. Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely.
But for everybody listening at home, I appreciate it. Thank you. Fuck you and good night.
Subscribe to the Ignorance is Strength podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. Like, follow, and share on Facebook and Instagram at Ignorance is Strength Podcast, and on Twitter at The Ignorance Pod.